Iran had several statements after the Israeli aggression against Iran. Firstly, the Israeli aggression wasn't a massive success. They clearly had certain things, projectiles or missiles landing on certain bases in Iran. However, they were carried out from outside of Iranian airspace. The argument is the Iranian air defense systems were more capable than what the Israelis or the American administration anticipated them to be. And they carried out the majority of the strikes from Iraqi airspace, especially or in particular, airspace that is used by the American forces in Iraq. Now, from the beginning, we heard a certain tone coming from Iran, which was quite natural when it comes to absorbing the hit, understanding what exactly happened, to establish what type of response we would anticipate and when that would come. So we had that absorption phase initially. However, then it came to the statements about the response of Iran. And in the initial phase, we had statements coming from Iran like, we reserve our right to respond in the right time and in the right manner. Then we had a statement coming out from the Iranian supreme leader saying that the authorities or the officials in Iran will do what's best for the Iranian population and for the Islamic Republic of Iran. Again, hinting that he's giving them a level of independence when it comes to that, but there was nothing very severe or very clear. However, now we have more sharp responses coming from Iran. And again, these responses and these statements are not to be taken lightly. Why? Because now Iran established itself as a country that says things and does them. So it's not only talk, we're talking about action, and it's not only action from movements aligned with Iran or supported by Iran, although they have their independence. You're talking about Iran as a state directly. So we had a couple of reports today. One of them was this report in Tasnim, which is a semi-official Iranian news agency, Tasnim news agency, about the latest speech of Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran. And he said some interesting things in this speech, especially when it comes to the response of Iran. So, the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, reminded the enemies, including the US and the Zionist regime, that they will definitely receive a crushing reaction to what they are doing against Iran and the resistance front. Now, notice the terminology that is being used here, alongside the fact that this response isn't only coming for the aggression against Iran, but also the resistance fronts. When they had their attack on Israel on the 1st of October, they said this is for Ismail Haniyeh, for Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, and for the children of Gaza. So it's not just because of the aggression against Iran, and that has been very evident from the actions of the Islamic Republic of Iran. They added, Ayatollah Khamenei made the remark at a meeting with a group of students of all ages, including university students from across Iran, at the Imam Khomeini Husseiniya of Tehran on Saturday, November the 2nd. In the meeting, Ayatollah Khamenei elucidated the fundamental grounds for the Iranian nation's battle against the oppression and excessive demands of the United States, spanning over 70 years. Again, that's something very interesting as well in the speech, the fact that Ayatollah Khamenei is including previous periods when it comes to Iran, from the days of Mossadegh, who had the important operation at the time from the CIA which was called the Ajax operation. If you haven't heard about it, I'd recommend you go and read up about it, when they took down a democratically elected government in Iran, and a coup, really, again supported by Western intelligence agencies, against a man who wasn't necessarily like a religious figure. He had certain alliances, but that's for those who, some people will say it's only against certain governments with a certain shape or ideology. No, it's about certain people who strive for independence from the global hegemony of the empire, and who prioritize the interests of their own country and the interests of their own people before the interests of foreign greedy corporations who constantly try and impose their will, including through acts of terror and violence. That is very important when it comes to his speech. The leader emphasized that the Islamic national, rational, wise, and humane resistance displayed by the Iranian nation against US arrogance, in line with international laws, will continue with the correct roadmap and without negligence or delay. So there's something imminent here. On this victorious path, any hostile actions taken against the Iranian nation by the Zionist regime and the United States will be met with a crushing response. This is also important. The leader pointed out the continuous and unwavering efforts of the Iranian nation and officials in confronting global arrogance. The general movement of the nation and officials against global arrogance and the criminal system governing the current world order is a logical one, in line with religion, ethics, Islamic and international laws, he stated. MahmoodOD reported. The leader described the Iranian nation's fight against global arrogance as a permanent endeavor, designating a day as the National Day of Fighting Against Global Arrogance is, in fact, to ensure that this historic battle will not be forgotten. This is especially significant given the attempts by certain people to sow doubt in the nation's courageous and conscious efforts to stand up and fight against the US and its proxies in the region, and subsequently to deny this opposition. He highlighted addressing efforts by certain individuals to question the authenticity of the seizure of US Embassy in Tehran, known as the spy den. The leader affirmed that the US Embassy in Tehran, as evidenced by the seized documents, functioned as a command center for instigating counter-revolutionaries, remnants of the Shah's Savak, sowing discord, inciting ethnic conflicts, plotting a coup, threatening the life of Imam Khomeini, and undermining the revolution. This reality remains unchanged, even if some of those involved in the incident have developed doubts, he said. And of course, we have more confirmation coming just recently from the attempts of the US ambassador in Lebanon meeting with opposition in Lebanon and talking about the need for them to go and start taking actions against Hezbollah. Again, in a confirmation of an Israeli failure in Lebanon and the nature of the malicious role that US embassies play across the world. The leader further pointed out the revelatory nature of the documents discovered by the US spy den, urging the youth to carefully examine them. He described the seizure of the US spy den as a turning point, a historic and unforgettable event due to the revelation and the nature of the American embassy. It was for this reason that Imam Khomeini, with his all-pervading insight, approved of the students' action. He also criticized individuals who seek to portray the actions of the Iranian people against imperialism as irrational, adding, "We do not accuse these individuals of treachery. However, when they misrepresent this just, rational movement, which aligns with international logic, as illogical, they demonstrate, at the very least, that they are short-sighted and lacking in foresight." He asserted that the Iranian people's cherished status in the global public opinion, despite the extensive efforts of the hegemonic system's media system, is a testament to the effectiveness of the Islamic Republic's successful and rational resistance. The fact that people in various countries took the streets in celebration after Operation True Promise indicates that the Iranian nation's movement is not only in accordance with international logic, but with Islamic and Quranic logic. In the continuation of his remarks, Ayatollah Khamenei underscored that the actions of the enemy will not go unanswered by those who are working to fight them on behalf of the Iranian nation, and that such actions will not be forgotten. He asserted that both the Zionist regime and the United States will undoubtedly receive a crushing response for their actions against the Iranian nation and the resistance front. This is also very important because, like I said, Iran established its responses on Israel on international law, and when they talk about that, they always used to speak about the attack on Iranian sovereignty. However, adding the resistance fronts adds another depth or another layer to that response. And again, it's coming in accordance to previous statements that we heard from Iran, and again with international law, because don't forget, when it comes to UN resolutions and international law, all of the countries across the world have a right to have a preemptive strike against a reckless entity that is proving to be conducting acts of mass terror and war crimes and has an expansionist nature and proven by the international court to be conducting a genocide. And therefore, Iran is also elaborating when it comes to their attack and how they will also attack. Referring to certain misguided historians who attribute the beginning of Iran's opposition with America to the seizure of the US spy, then the leader stated that is a lie. The opposition has existed since at least August 1953, because it was the date that the Americans betrayed the trust of Prime Minister Mossadegh's national and popular government, overthrowing it in a bloody coup before reinstating the oppressive Pahlavi regime. And this is what we spoke about previously, Operation Ajax, taking down a democratically elected leader in Iran way before the Islamic Revolution of 1979. And they ended up with Ayatollah Khamenei emphasized that the establishment of Savak and its training of interrogators in brutal interrogation techniques, along with the presence of tens of thousands of American advisors involved in military and government interference, infiltration, and espionage as other anti-Iranian measures that were undertaken by the US. He highlighted that these actions were designated to humiliate the Iranian nation and assert dominance over Iran. So we are having more serious, outright, clear statements coming from the Iranian leader when it comes to the response. And this is not just coming from the supreme leader himself, this is also coming from the IRGC. We also had this article as well when it comes to the response of Iran, and more statements coming from the IRGC about the type of response we are anticipated to see when it comes to Israel. So we had this report here. The commander of the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps warned the Zionist regime that it will receive such a great response for its act of aggression against Iran that it cannot conceive. Such a great response that it cannot conceive. Addressing a cultural event in Iran's southern province of Fars on Thursday, Major General Hossein Salami pointed to the Zionist regime's attack on Iran on October 26, saying that the Israelis are mistaken to think that they can change the history by launching a number of missiles. He then reminded the Israeli regime of the retaliatory True Promise 2 operation that Iran carried out on October 1st, saying the Zionists have not forgotten how the Iranian missiles streaked across the sky while the Israeli air defense missile systems failed to counteract. The IRGC commander then warned Israel that it will be given an unimaginable response for its act of aggression against Iran. And before we continue, by the way, the reason that we're mentioning this here, again, is to highlight the difference from the early days when it comes to a week ago, what Iran was saying when it comes to the response, and how fierce the responses are. And I will tell you why I think that is the case at the moment. On October 1st, Iran responded to the Israel assassination of Hamas political bureau chief Ismail Haniyeh, Hezbollah Secretary General Said Hassan Nasrallah, and IRGC General Abbas Nil Furushan by launching as many as 200 ballistic missiles toward the Zionist regime's military and intelligence bases all over the occupied Palestinian territories. In the early hours of October 26th, the Zionist regime attacked a number of military sites in Iran, which resulted in the martyrdom of 4 servicemen and a civilian. In remarks on October 27, the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, emphasized the necessity of disrupting the flawed calculations of the Zionist regime regarding Iran. They're making a miscalculation with respect to Iran. Our officials should be the ones to assess and precisely apprehend what needs to be done and do whatever is in the best interest of this country and nation. They must be made, or the enemy, made to realize who the Iranian people are and what the Iranian youth are like, the leader added. And this final statement is the best example of the difference when it comes to the tone, leaving it to the officials in the best interest of the Iranian people and the Iranian youth. And then we, of course, reached this stage now. This stage of, firstly, the IRGC, the unimaginable response. Sayyid Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is saying it's a crushing response. Okay, what changed in the past week, and why is Iran having such harsh statements now? And why did they not have these harsh statements before? What has changed, and what are we anticipating to see in the next few days or in the very short coming period? Well, firstly, and that's purely an assessment and an observation from myself, Iran could have easily had a certain limited amount of time where they, of course, absorbed the attack that came from Israel and then tried to a certain extent, use the fact that they haven't responded yet as leverage to try and get things in order. Immediately after Israel had the attack on Iran, we heard about and spoke about intensive prospects of a ceasefire, both in Lebanon, both in Gaza. The American mediators were there, the Israeli mediators were there, the delegations were in Doha, were in Qatar, Hochstein was in Lebanon. We had intensive talks about a ceasefire. This could have been a certain attempt or a certain theater from the United States administration to show Iran that we are indeed looking towards a ceasefire, so don't respond, thinking that the Iranian officials will do the same thing that they've done in July, which was, well, Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran. It was clearly Israel. He was assassinated one day after the president came in and after the president saw him in Iran. Massive act of terror. And the United States came to Iran and they told them, listen, Iran, I know, they killed Ismail Haniyeh, and of course, put aside the fact that he's the main negotiator, he already accepted the ceasefire, and the fact that Israel is killing everyone who is potentially trying to reach a ceasefire. But they told the Iranians, we're just a few weeks away from a ceasefire. Please do not respond to Israel. The Iranians, not necessarily out of faith and trust in the United States administration, told them, fine, no problem. You want to negotiate? Go ahead and negotiate, and tell us what's about to happen. Okay, we'll put it on hold in the meantime. I'm not sure if they clarified or not, but that's probably the case because they haven't responded up until October the 1st. So there was over 2 months there. All right. Then the Iranian president said, well, the Americans told us in July, don't respond because a ceasefire was 1 week away. A ceasefire agreement was 1 week away. Again, the Iranians have a very long history with the United States. They did not do that out of trust or faith in the United States administration, but as a very clever act to show the whole world and elaborate further what everything is about. We have a lot of propaganda. Many people are still to this day being misled. And the more time goes by, the clearer the image is for everyone globally when it comes to Iran. Now we reach this stage. So we have blatant Israeli aggression against Iran, because don't forget, in July, they did not confirm that they attacked or they were the ones who assassinated Hania, but Iran still responded. Now we have an aggression from Israel. We have a confirmation from Israel, and we also have a confirmation that this is not necessarily the last one. Again, everything is arguable when it comes to the last one because of the levels of success, the air defense systems of Iran, their effectiveness, the fact that we didn't have a successful campaign, most of the missiles were intercepted, and the fact that they did not dare come near the Iranian airspace in fear of losing their fighter jets. They only fly over civilian areas, civilian buildings, hospitals, and innocent women and children, and bomb them indiscriminately. But against someone who has power, that doesn't work. And what does that prove to you again? That they understand the language of force. They do not understand the language of peace, and they do not understand the language of diplomacy, because nothing changes unless they are met with force. They have a history of only understanding with force, which is very typical to any colonial entity. A colonial entity coming, planting itself through terror and imposing its will on the indigenous people. They only understood through force because that's the language that they were inflicting on a mass scale against the population. And the use of force is incomparable, by the way, between the aggressors and the people defending themselves. In this case, in all historical cases of colonialism in the region and globally as well. So what are we looking to see? Well, based on the statements that we are hearing from Iran, based on the speed at which the tone changed from the Iranian leadership, and in particular from the supreme leader and the IRGC, we are indeed looking towards a very big and sharp response coming from Iran against Israel. Is that attack going to be all out, never-ending attack? No, not necessarily, but it's going to be an attack that is bigger than the previous attacks, because the pattern of Iranian behavior when it comes to Israel operated in this manner. We had the attack in April, we had the attack in True Promise 2, more intense. What we're expected to see is even more intense than those previous two attacks, and we could be seeing other bases being targeted. There isn't a lot of likelihood that Iran would necessarily start to target Israel's infrastructure, for example, when it comes to their next attack. But again, it wouldn't be surprising if they would. They would definitely be targeting things, in my opinion, to do with the military of the genocide state. But we were surprised by certain actions from Iran before, and there is no reason to say why we wouldn't be surprised again by the level of Iranian response.